If that little girl truly has money in her account, I'll pay her double right here and now. The words didn't just echo, they crashed through the Grand Manhattan branch of Blackwell Bank like a whip of cruelty. They bounced off the marble pillars, hung in the air like smoke, and froze the morning crowd mid-step. Conversations halted. Pens stopped scratching. Even the rhythmic clicking of heels on polished floors fell silent as every eye shifted toward the counter. And there she was. A little black girl, barely 6 years old, clutching a worn teddy bear that looked like it had been loved through every storm of her short life. Her name was Anna. She had walked in moments earlier, her steps small but steady, after her father, Donovan Blackwell, paused at the curb, bent down to her level, and pressed a sleek black card into her tiny hand. Anna, he had told her in a voice that carried both tenderness and command, this belongs to you now. Go inside, show them, and remember, you are my daughter. Never bow to anyone who doubts that. His tone was not casual, it was a promise, and a legacy, echoing the vow he had made to her parents before they died, saving his life. That responsibility weighed heavy on his shoulders, and now, for the first time, it would be tested through the innocence of a child. Anna, barely tall enough to see over the counter, rose onto her tiptoes, the black card gleaming in her trembling hand. She slid it across the marble, her little voice soft but carried by courage. This is mine. I'd like to check my account. The teller blinked, then chuckled, his lips curling in disbelief. Yours, sweetheart. Do you even know what this card is? This isn't yours. The crowd began to stir, amusement sparking like wildfire. At that moment, Victor Maroro, the branch manager, emerged from his glass office. His smirk formed before he even spoke, the kind of smirk that thrived on arrogance. She must have stolen it, he declared loud enough for everyone to hear. A 6-year-old with a Blackwell card? Impossible. That card belongs to someone important. The whispers flared. Where'd she get it? Poor thing must be making it up. She's lying, you can see it. The murmurs wrapped around Anna like coiled snakes, squeezing her dignity. But she didn't shrink. Her knuckles tightened around the teddy bear, her chin lifted an inch higher. It is mine, she repeated, her small voice cracking but unshaken. Victor leaned in, savoring the mockery. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced with theatrical flourish, let's settle this. We'll check the balance and prove just how real her claim is. The teller, smirking alongside his boss, slid the card into the terminal. The machine beeped. Keys clicked. And then silence. His smirk faltered. His eyes widened. His hands hovered in disbelief. Victor, impatient, snatched the printed slip before the teller could speak. He laughed even before reading it, then froze. The laughter died in his throat, choked off by the impossible number staring back at him. His face drained of color. The account balance was astronomical. Enough to purchase the very building they stood in. Enough to silence every whisper. Enough to turn arrogance into shame. The lobby shifted from mockery to stunned disbelief. People gawked at the fragile child holding a teddy bear, struggling to reconcile her small frame with the power hidden behind that black card. And then, the glass doors swung open. Donovan Blackwell stepped inside. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. Tall, sharply dressed, with eyes as cold as steel, he was not just a wealthy man, he was a name whispered in boardrooms, a man who had built empires and crushed rivals. His jaw was tight, his stride deliberate. Placing a steadying hand on Anna's shoulder, he looked directly at Victor, then at the crowd. That card, he said, his voice like thunder breaking through the marble silence, belongs to my daughter, Anna Blackwell. The lobby gasped. Phones slipped from hands. Some customers turned away in shame, realizing their whispered doubts now carried the weight of public humiliation. Donovan's gaze sharpened. And every whisper I heard in this room, every insult, every accusation aimed at her, will not be forgotten. Victor stammered. Mr. Blackwell, I didn't realize. You didn't care to realize, Donovan cut him off, his tone slicing the air. You saw a child. A black child. And you assumed theft. Lies. Fraud. You mocked her dignity in front of strangers. And worse, you made this institution complicit in cruelty. The room held its breath. Even the teller who had chuckled now stood pale as paper, wishing the floor would swallow him whole. Donovan leaned closer to Victor, his words carrying like a verdict. Do you know what happens when a bank betrays the dignity of its own family? No one spoke. Not a breath dared to break the silence. Donovan straightened, his voice rising with authority that filled every corner of the marble hall. I will not bury this disgrace. No, I will drag it into the light. This story will not die within these walls. The press will hear it. The world will know what happened here today. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some customers bowed their heads in shame, recalling their own whispered laughter. Others clenched fists, realizing justice had just stepped into the room. Anna pressed closer to her father's side, her eyes wet but shining. She didn't yet understand the weight of his words, but she felt his strength. For the first time since she entered, she no longer felt small. Her father had arrived. And he would not allow her to be mocked in silence. CE. Imagine this, a 6-year-old girl walks into a bank, clutching nothing but a teddy bear and her courage, and the world decides she doesn't belong. But what happens when the truth is too powerful to deny? The reckoning had only just begun. The silence in the marble lobby stretched so tight it could snap. Donovan's words still hung heavy in the air, as if the building itself had absorbed his thunder. No one dared to move. Anna leaned against him, her teddy bear pressed between them, her small frame trembling from the weight of what had just unfolded. Yet under his arm, she felt shielded, unbreakable. Victor Maroro's hands shook as he clutched the slip of paper with Anna's account balance. His smugness had evaporated. His lips quivered, his face pale, his polished shoes suddenly too heavy. He had mocked a child, and not just any child, but the daughter of the man who owned the very bank whose walls now trapped his humiliation. Mr. Blackwell, I didn't mean, Victor stuttered, his throat dry. You didn't mean. Donovan's voice cracked sharp as glass. You meant every word. You meant the laughter. You meant the mockery. You meant to humiliate a 6-year-old in front of strangers. That is what you meant. The customers shifted uncomfortably, shame prickling their skin. A woman with graying hair pressed her lips tight, regret etched in her face. A man in a business suit stared at the floor, ashamed of the chuckle he had allowed himself minutes earlier. Anna's small hand tugged at her father's sleeve. Her big brown eyes, glassy with hurt, looked up at him. Daddy, she whispered so softly it almost broke, they didn't believe me. Donovan bent, his hand steadying her trembling shoulder. His tone softened for her but carried loudly enough for the room to hear. They will believe you now. And they will never forget who you are. He straightened again, his gaze locked on Victor. This bank carries my family's name not just on its signs but in its values, or so I thought. Tell me, Mr. Maroro, What value is left when a manager teaches his staff to laugh at a child? Victor wiped sweat from his brow, his words tumbling out in desperation. It was a misunderstanding, sir. Surely, we don't need to make a scene. Donovan's jaw clenched, his voice rising, raw and commanding. A scene? You already made a scene. You turned my daughter into a spectacle. You stripped her dignity in the very house of her own family's institution, and now you worry about embarrassment. The teller who had first chuckled tried to step forward, his voice shaking. Mr. Blackwell, I only followed. Donovan raised a hand, silencing him instantly. Do not finish that sentence. You followed cruelty. You followed arrogance. That is no excuse. The crowd whispered among themselves, guilt rippling through the marble chamber. He's right, one man murmured. It was cruel, another added. I didn't know she was his daughter, but even if she wasn't, no child deserves that. Anna heard fragments of those whispers. For the first time, her heartbeat quickened not from fear, but from a rising sense of justice. Donovan stepped forward, his words lashing like fire. Every one of you should ask yourselves, what made you doubt her? Was it her age? Her color? Her simple dress? You saw innocence and called it theft. You saw a child and decided she could not belong here. That is the sickness of this world, and it will not be ignored. The weight of his words pressed on every soul present. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others fought tears. Victor's knees weakened, his words fumbling. Mr. Blackwell, please, if we could speak in your office. No, Donovan's voice boomed, final, echoing through the hall. We will not hide this behind closed doors. This insult was public. The correction will be public. The media will know every detail of what happened here today. Gasps filled the room. The mention of Anna's late parents deepened the silence into reverence. My God, a man whispered to his wife, her parents died for him, and still people dared to laugh at her. Anna's small voice broke the heavy quiet. Daddy, will everyone be angry with me? Donovan bent close, his tone tender yet unshakable. No, my love. They will be angry at themselves. And they will learn. Straightening once more, his voice struck like a verdict. Print copies of that balance slip, leave the name visible. Deliver them to every manager in this city before nightfall. Let them see what kind of child they mocked. The teller's hands trembled as he nodded, rushing toward the printer. Each sheet sliding out sounded like a drumbeat of consequence. Victor's voice cracked. Please, Mr. Blackwell, my career. Your career. Donovan thundered. You thought only of your career when you mocked a 6-year-old? You thought of appearances. Well, here is your appearance now, a grown man revealed as a coward before a child. The crowd flinched at his words. Then Anna's small, fragile voice cut through. Daddy, can we go home now? Donovan softened, brushing his hand over her braids. Soon, Anna. But not before they hear the truth. He turned back to the customers and staff. What you witnessed today is not just about one child. It is about every time this world judges by clothing, by color, by size, by silence. If you laughed with him, you will remember the shame. If you whispered against her, you will remember her courage. And if you ever again forget that every person deserves respect, remember this moment, because I will make sure the world never forgets it. Anna tucked the slip against her teddy bear, as if to say, this is mine. This is proof. Her chin lifted, her tiny shoulders squared. For the first time that morning, she smiled. It was small, but it was real. The reckoning had begun. And, how far would you go to defend your child's dignity? Some people fight with words, others with silence, but Donovan Blackwell had just declared war with truth. And the whole world was about to hear it. The air outside the Manhattan branch was sharp with autumn, crisp enough to bite. Yet the atmosphere simmered with something far hotter than weather, scandal. As Donovan Blackwell guided Anna down the granite steps, reporters surged forward like a wave sensing blood in the water. Cameras clicked furiously, microphones thrust into his path. Mr. Blackwell. We've heard rumors of an incident inside, can you confirm? One reporter shouted. Donovan didn't flinch. In fact, he wanted this moment. He had walked into storms before, but never one like this. His voice was steady, clipped, but sharp enough to cut glass. Yes. There was an incident. My 6-year-old daughter was mocked, humiliated, and accused of theft by those entrusted with this bank's values. And I promise you, it will not be swept under the rug. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Your daughter accused of theft. By whom? Another pressed, voice raised above the din. Anna, overwhelmed by the flashing lights and booming questions, clung tighter to her teddy bear. Her small eyes darted nervously. Donovan bent down, his voice low but clear enough for the cameras to catch. Stay strong, Anna. This is the truth being told. Straightening, he locked eyes with the reporters. Let me be perfectly clear. My daughter, Anna Blackwell, presented a legitimate account today. Instead of respect, she was laughed at. Instead of professionalism, she was accused of stealing. The balance in her account is irrelevant. What matters is the arrogance and prejudice that poisoned that lobby. Microphones surged closer. One reporter, bolder than the rest, asked, Mr. Blackwell, do you intend to take action against your staff? Donovan's jaw tightened, his gaze unflinching. Action has already begun. Every shareholder, every network in this city will know how this bank's reputation was dragged into shame. I will not tolerate a manager or teller who dares to insult my child. Anna tugged his sleeve, whispering, Daddy, they're looking at me. Donovan crouched, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the tenderness in his eyes. Let them look, Anna. Let them see who you are. You carry nothing to be ashamed of. One day you'll understand that dignity speaks louder than any whisper. Her lips pressed together, forming a small but determined line. She nodded bravely, though her teddy bear was clutched tighter than ever. At that moment, the bank doors creaked open again. Victor Maroro appeared, his face ashen, sweat still clinging to his temples. The flashbulbs found him instantly, exploding like fireworks. Mr. Maroro, did you mock the daughter of Donovan Blackwell? Is it true you accused a 6-year-old of theft? Do you have a comment on today's events? Victor froze, a deer caught in floodlights. His lips parted but no words came. The silence, amplified by the cameras, painted him as a villain without a trial. Donovan didn't so much as glance at him. Instead, he faced the reporters, his hand resting firmly on Anna's back. He pointed briefly toward Victor, his voice low but clear. That is the man who turned my daughter's truth into a joke. Remember his face. Remember the shame. Victor flinched as if struck. The reporters swarmed him, questions flying like arrows. Desperate, he shoved past them, fleeing into the street, his dignity shredded with every flash of a camera. Donovan lifted Anna into his arms, her teddy squashed between them. His voice was measured, almost solemn as he addressed the press one last time. This story isn't about wealth. It isn't about numbers on a screen. It's about respect. The respect owed to every human being, no matter their age, their color, or how they look. My daughter deserved that respect today. And she was denied it. That will not stand. He slid into his waiting car, the driver holding the door open as reporters shouted more questions. The door closed with finality, sealing father and daughter inside. The noise of the city dulled to a low hum. Anna leaned her head against his chest, her voice small and fragile. "Daddy, did I do something wrong?" His heart ached. He kissed the top of her head, his words low and fierce. "No, my love. You did everything right. They were the ones who were wrong. And now, they'll answer for it." She nodded sleepily, the weight of the day finally tugging her eyes closed. The teddy bear lay across them like a witness to all that had passed. Donovan stared out at the skyline, his reflection in the tinted glass cold and unyielding. The storm had only begun. His phone buzzed. Richard Hayes, chairman of the Blackwell Bank Board, appeared on the screen. Donovan answered without shifting Anna. "Donovan," Hayes said, his voice tense, "the press is swarming. What happened at the branch? What happened?" Donovan's voice was clipped. "My daughter was humiliated in front of your staff. Laughed at. Called a thief. By Victor Maroro himself." There was a pause, then the sound of a heavy sigh. "This is going to explode. We need to control the narrative." "No," Donovan snapped. "You don't control it. I do. I'll hold a press conference. The world will hear it straight from me." "Donovan, think carefully," Hayes urged. "The shareholders." "The shareholders," Donovan cut him off, "should worry less about dividends and more about dignity. If they can't stomach that, they'll learn whose name is on their paychecks." Hayes hesitated, then sighed in defeat. "Very well. But understand, Victor will fight to save himself. He's already calling contacts, trying to spin it." "Let him," Donovan growled. "He'll drown in his own excuses." He hung up, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. Adjusting Anna gently against his chest, he whispered a vow. "No one will ever strip you of dignity again." What happens when a father with power refuses to stay silent? The storm doesn't just stay in the lobby, it spreads to the streets, the boardrooms, and the headlines. And for Donovan, this was no scandal. This was war. By the time the limousine reached the Blackwell estate, the gates were swarmed with cameras and microphones. Reporters shouted questions, their voices piercing the iron fence. Security held the crowd back as the car slid through the gates. Inside, the mansion glowed warmly against the chaos outside. Donovan carried Anna past the grand staircase and into her room. He tucked her into bed, slid the teddy bear under her arm, and lingered at her side, watching her sleep. Her innocence softened the fury burning in his chest. Downstairs, his staff gathered anxiously. Margaret, his longtime assistant, stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwell, the media wants a statement. They're calling this a scandal." Donovan's voice was sharp, final. "It's not a scandal, it's a reckoning. Prepare the press room for tomorrow morning. Every major outlet will be invited." "And Victor?" Margaret asked carefully. A shadow crossed Donovan's face. "He's finished. By the time I'm done, he won't run a lemonade stand, let alone a bank branch." Margaret nodded grimly. She had worked with him long enough to know the weight of his words. That night, as New York buzzed with speculation, Anna slept peacefully, unaware of the storm her presence had unleashed. Donovan sat alone in his study, a glass of untouched scotch on the desk, drafting words that would shake the conscience of a nation. His pen scratched across paper with deliberate force. "True wealth is not measured in accounts, but in respect," he wrote. And today, respect was denied. Tomorrow, the world will know. By morning, the world wouldn't just know Anna's name. They would have to decide whether they stood for profit, or for dignity. The morning sun rose over Manhattan, painting the skyline in hues of gold. But inside the Blackwell estate, warmth had little power against the tension building. Reporters clogged the gates, their satellite vans and camera crews stretching down the block. Headlines already spun across newspapers and television screens. Bank manager accuses child of theft. Billionaire's daughter mocked in family's own institution. Inside, Donovan stood in his study, adjusting the knot of his tie. His reflection in the mirror was calm, but his jaw was iron. Today was not about appearances. Today was about truth. Margaret entered briskly, a clipboard in hand. Every major outlet will be there, CNN, The Times, even international press. They'll want specifics, Donovan. Names. Details. They'll have them, Donovan replied without hesitation. His eyes hardened. No hiding. No sugar-coating. Margaret shifted uneasily. Some members of the board are worried this will damage investor confidence. Donovan turned, his voice sharp as a blade. What damages confidence is arrogance left unchecked. If shareholders prefer dividends over dignity, they're free to sell. I'll rebuild without them. Margaret nodded. She had seen Donovan's fire before, but never with such personal stakes. This was no business deal. This was fatherhood forged into steel. Upstairs, Anna stirred awake. Padding down the hallway in her pajamas, teddy bear in hand, she entered the study. Donovan immediately bent down, scooping her into his arms. "Daddy, are we going somewhere?" she asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to tell the world what happened." Her brows furrowed. "Do I have to speak?" "No," Donovan said softly. "Just stand with me. That's enough." Anna hugged her teddy closer. "Will they believe me now?" Donovan's throat tightened, but he forced a steady smile. "They won't have a choice." By mid-morning, the estate's ballroom had transformed into a press hall. Rows of chairs filled with journalists, their whispers humming like a hive. Cameras perched like hawks, waiting to strike. At the front, a podium stood beneath the Blackwell crest, flanked by two flags, the American flag and the bank's insignia. The doors opened. Donovan entered with Anna at his side. Flashbulbs erupted instantly, the sharp clicks echoing under the chandeliers. Anna blinked at the sea of faces, her teddy bear clutched tightly, but Donovan's steady hand reassured her. He guided her gently to a seat beside the podium, then stepped up to the microphone. His voice, deep and commanding, filled the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "yesterday my daughter walked into a branch of this bank carrying a card with her name on it. She asked to check her account balance. What should have been a moment of simple respect became a moment of cruelty. She was laughed at, mocked, accused of theft. And why?" His voice sharpened. "Because she is young. Because she is black. Because she did not look like the customers they were accustomed to serving with smiles. That is the ugly truth. The hall fell silent. Pens hovered above notepads. Cameras zoomed in. Who was responsible? A reporter called out. Victor Maroro, Donovan said without hesitation. The branch manager. And the teller who followed his lead. They turned a child's dignity into entertainment. The name dropped like a stone into water. Pens scratched furiously, cameras caught every word. Donovan pressed on. Let me be clear, this is not just about my daughter. It is about every child, every person who has ever been judged by their skin, their age, their clothing. It is about a culture that allowed arrogance to masquerade as leadership. That ends today. He placed both hands firmly on the podium. As of this morning, Victor Maroro has been suspended pending full investigation. The teller involved will face immediate review. And every employee of this institution will undergo mandatory training in dignity and respect. We will rebuild this culture from the ground up. A hush fell. Then, applause. Not from the press, but from staff members who had slipped quietly into the back of the room. Hesitant at first, their clapping grew louder, relief flooding their faces. Anna looked around, her wide eyes flicking toward the applause. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood this: people weren't laughing anymore. They were listening. Donovan's voice softened as he glanced at her. Anna is only 6 years old. She lost her parents because they gave their lives to save mine. Yesterday, she carried that courage into a room that tried to strip it away. But she stood tall. Anna's cheeks flushed red as cameras swung toward her. She hugged her teddy tighter, unsure whether to smile or hide. Donovan rested a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. The lesson is simple, he said, his voice rising again. Wealth can be measured in numbers. But worth is measured in respect. And respect must never be denied. The room erupted in questions. Will you pursue legal action? Will Victor Maroro be terminated? Do you fear damage to the bank's reputation? Donovan raised a hand, commanding silence. The only harm to this bank is the harm already done. And the only way forward is truth. He stepped away from the podium, took Anna's hand, and together they walked out as flashbulbs popped like firewar. KS. By the time Donovan walked out, Anna's name was no longer just a child's name, it had become a symbol. But with symbols comes pressure. And pressure always makes enemies rise from the shadow. By noon, the press conference dominated every channel. In diners, office break rooms, and homes across the country, people watched the clip of Donovan beside his 6-year-old daughter. Hashtags spread like wildfire across social media, hashtag stand with Anna. Hashtag respect over wealth. Hashtag Blackwell truth. At Blackwell Tower, the board of directors gathered in a glass-walled conference room. The skyline glittered behind them, but the air was heavy with panic. Richard Hayes, the chairman, rubbed his temples. We have a crisis, he muttered. Donovan just threw us into the spotlight. Investors are nervous. Calls are pouring in. Victor Maroro has already reached out to 3 of us, begging for support. A woman in a tailored blazer leaned forward. Support? The man humiliated Donovan's daughter in his own bank. He's radioactive. We can't defend him. Another director, older and cautious, frowned. But Donovan's approach, going public like this, it risks everything. We could have handled it quietly. Quietly, the woman scoffed. That's the problem. Too much has been handled quietly. If Donovan hadn't spoken out, this would have been buried, and we'd look complicit. The room fell silent. They all knew she was right. Meanwhile, in his office across town, Victor Maroro paced like a man awaiting execution. His desk was littered with empty coffee cups. His phone vibrated constantly with calls he refused to answer. Headlines blared from the television. Blackwell manager accused of mocking child. This can't be happening, he muttered. One mistake, one stupid joke, and I'm finished. He slammed his fist on the desk. No. I won't let him destroy me. He grabbed his phone, dialing furiously. Yes, it's Victor. I need a statement out. Spin it. Say it was protocol. Say I thought the card was stolen. Yes. Do it now. But even as he barked orders, a sick knot twisted in his gut. No spin could erase the image of Donovan standing before cameras, declaring that the world would remember. At the Blackwell estate, Donovan sat in his study, flipping through a stack of newspapers Margaret had brought in. Anna's face graced the front page of every one. A little girl holding a teddy bear beside one of the nation's most powerful men. She's everywhere, Margaret said softly. The world has fallen in love with her. Donovan studied the photos, his heart torn between pride and sorrow. She should never have had to be this. A symbol. She's just a child. Margaret laid a hand on his desk. Sometimes symbols choose us. Or fate does. Donovan exhaled. His phone buzzed, a message from Richard Hayes. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. They want answers. They want blood. Donovan set the phone down. They'll get both. The battle had left the lobby. It had left the press hall. Now it was heading straight into the boardroom, the most dangerous battlefield of all. The Blackwell Tower boardroom was a fortress of glass and steel, perched high above the city. From its windows, Manhattan stretched like a kingdom below. But inside, the atmosphere was anything but regal. It was tense, electric, the kind of tension that only comes when reputations, careers, and millions of dollars are at stake. Donovan Blackwell entered the room with deliberate calm. He wore no smile, only resolve. Anna wasn't with him this time, this battlefield wasn't for children. She remained safely at the estate with Margaret, coloring quietly while the world debated her dignity. Around the long mahogany table sat the board of directors, faces carved with worry. At the head sat Richard Hayes, the chairman. His hands folded, his voice measured. Donovan, thank you for coming. As you know, yesterday's events have created turbulence. Donovan pulled out a chair, his gaze sweeping across the faces staring back at him. Some were allies, some were enemies, and some simply feared for their stock portfolios. Turbulence, he repeated, his tone laced with disdain. A 6-year-old child is mocked in her own bank, and you call it turbulence. I call it betrayal. Murmurs rippled around the table. One older director raised a cautious hand. We don't condone what happened, Donovan. But the way you went public, it's drawn scrutiny we weren't prepared for. Investors are nervous. Our reputation. Our reputation, Donovan cut him off, his voice thunderous, was shattered the moment Victor Maroro laughed at my daughter. Do not speak to me of nervous investors. Speak to me of dignity, because that's the only currency that matters now. The words landed heavy, silencing the room. Richard cleared his throat. Donovan, what do you propose? Donovan leaned forward, his hands braced against the table. Victor Maroro is finished. Terminate his contract today. Issue a public apology, national, not local. Retrain every employee in every branch, from tellers to executives. And make it clear, respect is not optional. A director frowned. And if we don't? Donovan's eyes locked onto him, cold and unyielding. Then I resign. And when I resign, I take every Blackwell dollar, every partnership, and every ounce of influence with me. This institution will collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. Gasps erupted. The boardroom, usually a theater of strategy, now felt like a courtroom. Donovan was the prosecutor, judge, and jury. Richard Hayes raised both hands, trying to calm the storm. We don't want your resignation, Donovan. No one here does. But we must act carefully. Victor has already contacted investors. He's spinning this as an overreaction. He's calling himself a scapegoat. Donovan's lip curled. Then let him. A scapegoat is still guilty. The room froze. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Victor Maroro strode in, his face pale but defiant. You think you can destroy me, Donovan, he spat. I've given 20 years to this bank. One mistake, and you paint me a monster. You're using your daughter's tears to play king. The board shifted, stunned by his intrusion. Donovan rose slowly, towering over Victor. His voice dropped, low and lethal. My daughter's tears are not a game. They are proof of your cruelty. Proof of your arrogance. And proof that you are unfit to lead anyone. Victor sneered. You think the world cares? They'll forget by next week. Investors don't care about morality, they care about numbers. Donovan's voice rose, every syllable a hammer. Numbers mean nothing without respect. And yesterday, you taught the world exactly who you are. You are not just a disgrace, you are the headline. And history will not remember you as a banker. It will remember you as the man who mocked a 6-year-old girl. The silence that followed was suffocating. Victor's face crumbled, his bravado collapsing under the weight of Donovan's words. He looked around desperately, but not one board member met his eye. One by one, they turned their gaze away. His isolation was absolute. Richard Hayes spoke, his voice heavy. Victor Maroro, you are hereby terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Victor's knees buckled. He muttered something inaudible, then stormed out, his career shattered in front of the very people he once commanded. Donovan remained standing, his presence filling the room. Let this be the lesson, he declared. This institution does not belong to arrogance. It belongs to dignity. And if anyone here cannot carry that truth, they will leave as he just did. The board sat in stunned silence, but beneath their fear was something else, relief. Relief that someone had finally spoken the words they had been too cowardly to voice. By the time Donovan left the tower, the news had already broken. Victor Maroro terminated after scandal. Blackwell demands dignity in banking. Anna Blackwell, the child who changed the bank. At home, Anna waited in the garden, her teddy bear on her lap. When Donovan stepped out of the car, she ran to him, her little legs pumping, arms wide. Daddy! Did it work? He bent down, scooping her into his arms. Yes, Anna. It worked. The world listened. Her eyes sparkled. So no one will laugh at me again. He kissed her forehead, his voice gentle but resolute. They might laugh again, my love. But next time, they'll remember who you are. And they'll remember the price of disrespect. She leaned her head against his shoulder, content. That night, as the city buzzed with headlines and conversations, Donovan tucked Anna into bed. Her teddy bear nestled beside her, her smile soft as sleep claimed her. In his study, Donovan poured a glass of water, not scotch. For the first time in days, his chest felt lighter. He opened his notebook, the one where he had drafted his speech, and wrote a final line beneath his notes: "Dignity is wealth that cannot be stolen." He closed the book and let silence settle around him. Sometimes battles are won in boardrooms, sometimes in headlines, but the greatest victories are written in the heart of a child who finally knows she is seen. The scandal faded from headlines weeks later, but the lesson remained. Employees spoke differently in lobbies. Managers thought twice before mocking a stranger. And every time Anna visited a branch with her father, respect followed her like a shadow. And though she didn't fully understand it yet, Anna had changed more than her own story. She had changed an institution, and perhaps even a culture. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that shine a light on dignity, justice, and the voices too often ignored. Share this video with someone who believes every child deserves respect. Together, we can remind the world that true wealth isn't money, it's humanity.